Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Motivational speaker, the comeback coach, and goal crusher Joe Rivera brings you inspiring leaders, incredible stories, and valuable lessons on how you can change, grow, and reforge your life. Now, here's your host, Joe Rivera.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Reforge Your Life Show. I'm your host, Joe Rivera. And here at the Reforge Your Life Show, we like to show you that the comeback is more than possible. And today, I'm psyched about the guest that I'm bringing onto the show. Y'all are going to love her energy, her story. She's a keynote speaker. She's an emotional intelligence educator. Jessica Sudin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe.
I'm grateful to have you here, and I'm grateful that we're able to create impact together with this. So listen, I heard your story, but I definitely can't tell it anywhere close to as good as you can. Nobody can. So I'd love for you to share your story with the audience and tell them a little bit more about Jessica Sudin.
Absolutely. So I'm Jessica Sudin. I do keynote speaking, and the keynotes that I deliver are all around social and emotional intelligence. But my uniqueness is that I use motorsport analogies to educate on emotional and social intelligence. And my motorsports background came from winning motorcycle lessons at a fundraiser in university. And that little sprinkle of riding bikes turned into racing motorcycles, turned into building my motors in my living room, and then heading off to northern Spain in Basque Country and doing a master's in race car engineering, motorsport race engineering. And from there, I worked as a freelance race car engineer at all the best tracks in Europe. So taking all that and my executive corporate experience is how I blend all of that into some pretty unique stories to have a very unique keynote.
Man, race car driving and turning it into becoming a keynote speaker and a coach. I'm curious though, man. That's awesome, by the way. But I'm curious, what are some of the challenges in life that you went through this journey that you've been on? Because man, it sounds like an incredible journey, and I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, lots of bumps along the way. You know, I did engineering in the mid 90s is when I went into university, and I was one of very few females in engineering. And I decided that I liked mechanical, which was even less. So that was an interesting one. And it wasn't the best subject that I was good at. So, you know, when you're thinking, and I love the name of your podcast, like forging, you know, I forged on, even though mechanical engineering was my worst, as opposed to, you know, I was really good at programming and things like this. But, and even the motorcycle racing, I never grew up with motorcycles at all. I didn't do dirt biking as a kid or anything. So it was really challenging for me to start my motorcycle life in my mid 20s. And I was 29 when I did my very first motorcycle race, and it was terrifying. And I bombed my start, and at 200 kilometers an hour or faster, so about I don't know, 150 plus miles an hour, you don't really have time to start saying, oh God, you did that start really poorly. You know, you got lots of fast turns coming up. And from there, going in and doing my master's, you know, one of the biggest challenges there was moving to a new country. I knew French, not so much Spanish, and no friends, no language. And I was about to tackle four-wheel beasts. So I didn't drive the cars, but I engineered them. Four-wheel beasts are very different than two-wheel beasts, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the language barrier coming into, first of all, I mean, you're coming into a new country that you don't speak the language fluently, and you're a woman in a male dominant industry.
Absolutely.
What was that like?
You know, what I find is that you just can't make mistakes, Joe. You know, people are always looking at you a little bit more than everybody else. They really are. So I was the second woman that graduated from this particular master's. I was the only one in my class. And at the end of the day, it was my motorcycle racing that saved my bacon.
Mm.
You know, So when I worked on various teams, I even worked on a German team, so I had to learn a bit of German as well. But I ended up taking my mechanics into the where the engineers sat and stuff. And I had to show them, look, I've done mechanics on my race bikes and I know about racing because I was in it and being a tuner. So you really have to get that credibility. And it's a bit of an uphill battle. Like you just have to prove and prove and prove yourself over and over.
Absolutely. I could only imagine what that's like being in a male dominant industry and you're trying to pave your way to the top. That by itself is challenging. And I'm curious because you mentioned, you know, about not making mistakes, but being in the world of personal development and growing through growth every day, we know that failure is part of success, and we make mistakes and we learn from them. So, how did you overcome that challenge in an industry where they looked at you like, man, you better not make no mistakes as a woman in this industry, or you're done? Because I'm sure there was
Yeah.
mistakes along the way that you grew from. So, how did you overcome that?
Yeah. So for example, I in the race car teams, so you don't have time for a lot of mistakes. So I remember I was a race in Nürburgring, and at one point there was an overlook of a setting that was wet versus dry. And at the end of the day, regardless of whether it was a mechanics that forgot something, it all falls on the engineer.
Hmm.
And how I grew from that was I decided, okay, what can we put in place so that these things don't happen again?
Yeah.
And I think it was through mutual acceptance of what happened. Let's grow through this mistake. Let's make the process better. So
Hmm.
what can we do? Is it checklists? Is it extra eyes on the car while we're on the pre-grid? Like, so I always took those kind of little speed bumps, no pun intended, in into account in order to improve the system.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful because when those mistakes do occur, right? Because those bumps in the road, right, that you're talking about, that's where the growth happens. And being able to put systems in place to learn from those mistakes to make sure that you're not making the same mistake over and over and over again, expecting a different result, because we all know that's the definition of insanity, right? So learning to put that system in place so that that same mistake doesn't keep occurring is powerful, and it's important for people to realize that, man, you know what, shit, nobody's perfect. It's okay to make a mistake, but as long as I'm learning from this mistake and I'm growing from it and being able to catapult into my future, then that's a win, actually, right? Because it's not
Yeah.
about perfection. Perfection is an illusion. It doesn't even exist. It's all about being able to progress and grow through growth on a day by day basis. I'm a
Yeah,
big believer in that, in progression over perfection any day of the week. It's that
totally.
perfection thing
And
that drives
it's
me crazy, you know?
and it's interesting when you say personal growth as well. There were times where, I was very isolated and secluded in the middle of nowhere, at some
Mm,
track in a hotel. And when it came to, there was a time where I had almost all the mechanics on one team when I was very new to the team weren't very keen on me, you
mm,
know, and how do you deal with that? And one of my biggest, and God rest her soul, my mom was there for me. I had a little cheat sheet for her to learn how to use Skype. This is in the early 2000 or 2010s type. And it was amazing to be able to get on the Skype with mom with the internet. Thank God for the internet as well. And go back to my roots and remember who I am, the love that I bring to the world,
mm,
and how am I going to forge a relationship with all of these, and at the time they were all men, all of these mechanics so that we can work symbiotically together. So it was a lot of observation, a lot of cultural awareness, understanding, okay, maybe these guys don't want the please and the thank you. They think I'm a kiss ass. That was some of the feedback that I got. I'm serious, Joe. It was crazy. So I was told to turn down my Canada a little bit, and I did. And I did. And that was such a growth moment because all of a sudden I was getting more respect from them. I certainly wasn't rude, but I
Mm.
wasn't as overly friendly
Yeah.
as maybe I usually am.
It was more like what I'm getting is you weren't trying so hard. You were being more of yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, because you mentioned that there was a time where there was loneliness, isolation, and I mean, that's important for the audience to pick up on because there's people who are going through that isolation, loneliness right now.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little more about what that felt like before we talk about how you overcame that? What did it do to your mind? What did it do to you as
Absolutely.
a person?
Yeah. So you can imagine I'm living in this 10,000 person town in the middle of Basque Country. And, I don't have friends around me. I'm still trying to learn Spanish. I'm still trying to learn Basque a little bit. And that isolation, there were times where I just didn't want to leave the house. I just wanted to, stay in my little apartment and, hide from everything. But you don't really have that option. And I know a lot of people that feel lonely. They're like, how am I going to break through this barrier? And even when I was traveling around, I loved traveling. But there were some times where I had to spend weeks on end away from Spain. And that isolation just came with this whole wave of self-doubt. Like, do I really have this? Have
Yeah.
I really like walked away from this, pretty predictable life in Canada to
Mm.
go and live this dream of mine, not knowing that there's going to be some very lonely times in it, you know? And it's that thing where where that self-doubt comes in and that imposter syndrome comes in. And who am I to be here? Who am I, this person who has no background in motorsports? Who am I to be here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's so powerful for people to realize that, when you're chasing a dream, you're chasing, that purpose in your life. Because I believe that we get, sometimes we're blessed with more than one purpose in life, right? And it sounds like in your case you were, right? And this purpose was driving you. This was a dream that you had, something that you wanted to do. And when we're chasing that, I think it's important for the audience to realize that it can get lonely. It can get shaky. It can get, create doubt in your mind. And you mentioned, the doubt, the imposter syndrome, the worry, the self-sabotage that's going on. And what did this prevent you from when you were going through this, through these limited beliefs?
Right. So most of the time, I mean, this prevents you from integrating into a culture. It prevents you from integrating into a team in a timely manner. But I think all of that self-doubt and everything was really all the resilience that comes from that you don't even realize is
Mm.
growing inside of you. Even though you're struggling, like I'm in the middle of Austria or Holland or Germany or wherever you are, and you're thinking like I'm this little lone boy, in the middle of all of these people that know each other, all these people that speak the same language, all these people that have been on teams for so long, and you're the newbie in the group.
Yeah.
So when these doubts come in, especially if you have some self-sabotage and maybe you stay in your hotel room because you're just not wanting to push those limits. You're worried about people not liking you or, and that really stifles you from being integrated and getting that best experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It can definitely stifle you if you allow it to, right? And it could be something that stifles you for a long, long time if you don't shake it and realize that, man, this circumstance and condition is not going to control my life. I'm in control of my life. I'm in the driver's seat. And if we don't realize that, it could be detrimental to your life, to your future, to your career, to your purpose, to everything you're building,
Absolutely.
right? And you mentioned something that's really important and powerful, as far as when you had that shift. and you started thinking about, you know, the person that your mom taught you to be, the person that your mom raised you to be, and you started
Yeah.
thinking of that when you had that shift. And I think it's so important for people to realize out there, especially like parents, man. It's important what you instill in your children, because it's life lasting what what you're instilling in your child. Because think about this. You know, Jessica's over here talking about going through all this worry, all this self doubt, all this, you know, self sabotage, imposter syndrome. The list goes on and on. And then there's that little voice, and that little voice is her mom. That little voice is her mom, and the story that her mom instilled in her from childhood, that she's starting to grasp onto and starting to believe, and it's starting to help her. And the same way this story and belief that was instilled in her helped her, if it was an opposite voice of self, of, you know, putting her down, talking down than what she is, that's the voice and story she could have heard, and it could have made it worse. So it's so important for parents out there to realize how important it is that your words that you're telling your children are super, super powerful. So,
Yeah.
Jessica, I'm curious though, with when did that shift happen? What was it that occurred that you started saying, you started hearing the voice that your mom instilled, and the words that your mom told you as you were growing up, to you becoming, you know, the woman that you're meant to be?
No, it was it's interesting because it was almost the same realization that happened over and over. So it wasn't like one day it shifted and then everything was good for the rest of the season. You know, I had to go back and have these centering moments. So I would start off by actually calling my mom and calling a couple of my good friends, you know, from Canada that had known me for so long. Some of my cousins. My cousins are a very important part of my life. I'm cousin Jessica Sudin on Facebook because of all of my cousins. And the shift really happened when my mom reminded me, like, look at the things that you've done.
Mm,
Look at the things that you've done in your past, even as a child, you know, like all that shininess. You always put a smile on other people's faces. You always made people have a better day, even when you were a kid. And that was one of the biggest shifts because I realized me not showing up was also detrimental for the rest of the team because I bring that energy in and I make everyone have a better time, you know. And it was getting that grounding and remembering who I am, remembering, look, you know, all those challenges that you faced when you were the only woman at the racetrack, even racing motorcycles. I didn't race in any sort of other championships, women's championships, till much later in my racing. And thinking about the strength that I had to wake up in the morning, load up my trailer, get myself to the track, you know, and hop on my bike and go. So while I was in those lonely moments, sometimes I would go and look at the pictures of my bike ripped apart in my living room with a Japanese manual that I had to try to put it back together, you know, and you know, like really looking at some of those photos from my childhood too, where I was, you know, I was the star that helped people get along and helped people. I was always part of the different groups of friends. So even seeing photos of my friends and stuff really helped me ground myself and get out of the self-sabotage and say, Jess, it's enough now. It's time to go and let your brightness shine because that's your gift to the world, is to
mm.
make everyone's day better than right before they saw you.
Man, that is so powerful, because it's so important to realize that you could always realign yourself with your purpose, realign yourself with who you're meant to be, and what your creator created you to be on this earth for.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example of that, right? Because man, you had all these, limited beliefs and the inner critic popping up inside your head telling you you're not good enough, and self-sabotage and doubting yourself, and creating worry, anxiety, imposter syndrome, and coming up in a male dominated industry, that could be, very, very challenging. And for a lot of people, it's difficult to overcome. And you overcame that because you changed the narrative in the story that you were telling yourself. You didn't
Yeah,
allow yourself to believe that story anymore. And, it's important for people to realize that the story you tell yourself is what your future is going to look like.
that's right. That's right. I mean, if I told myself and carried on with those other stories, I'd be back in Canada looking for another, engineering design job. And
Mm,
I'd be so disappointed for not following through with my dream.
yeah.
And Joe, you and I haven't met in person, but I'm all 5'1.5", maybe, and about a buck 10. So you can imagine when I'm working in these male dominated fields, I also don't have this giant physical presence around.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I hear that. And that's why, the vision we create for ourselves, and the story we tell ourselves, it doesn't matter how tall we are. It doesn't matter what we look like. It doesn't matter what,
Mm.
where we don't have abilities that other people have, because the story we tell ourselves and the vision we create could make us all 7 foot tall, could make us all, in the healthiest shape that we've ever been in, could make us all be able to go out there and create impact, because it's your
Yes.
vision. It belongs to you. Your story belongs to you. Nobody could tell you how you're going to live your life, and the vision that you're going to create for yourself. So, man, it's congratulations on that, on
Thank
not
you.
giving up on your dream, not giving up on what you believed in yourself, which is another part of success that I think is vital. Is you got to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is going to believe in you, and you're not going to be able to do anything.
And I think Joe is that believing in yourself, like this is you're almost bringing me to tears when you're saying this, because at the end of the day, a lot of people will look at other people and say, yeah, but they're this person that did all this. And once we realize that we're all humans and that we all have the potential, it's all in our inner story.
Mm, that's
We
right.
all have the potential. I'm no different than anyone else.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're
Anyone can
absolutely
do it.
right. We all have. We're all born with that potential. We're all born with a purpose. It's our job to go out there and find that purpose and unlock that fullest potential that you're born with. It's
Yeah.
your duty. It's your duty as a spiritual being living this human experience. You have
Yes.
the ability to go out there and create your own destiny. Uh, Jessica, I'm curious, because I believe that when we crack through, this belief system and all these limited beliefs and stories we tell ourselves, and reshape the story and rebuild the belief system to a new belief system, I believe that there's core values that are uncovered. And those core values we're able to kind of dig into in difficult times to help us overcome those difficult times.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, because everybody's core values are different. So, what are some of the core values that you uncovered and that you utilize now when those difficult times come up? Because difficult times are going to come up every day. Life's going to throw curveballs. It's going to hit you below the belt. And you know what? When you get hit below the belt, congratulations. Say thank you, because that means you live to see another day. That means you grew another perseverance muscle. So, what
That's
what
right.
are some of those core values that you lean into?
Love that you said perseverance muscle. I might have to steal that from you on one of my keynotes sometime. Love it. Um, when I am so fortunate that even though I have this pretty heavy technical side, with all the engineering stuff, one of the biggest values that I realized that I brought with me was that whole idea of having compassion for people
Mm.
and being the compassionate human in any situation that I'm at, right? So even though I was doing all the technical stuff with the race cars, making sure there's fuel in them, all of this kind of stuff, I made sure the parents felt welcome. I made sure the drivers are feeling heard,
Yeah.
even though every now and again you gotta give them the gears to go a little faster. But one of my big core values is living in compassion and making people feel heard. And for me, it's the energy that I get back. And that also is what really fires me up and makes me say, okay, this is why you got out of your head, got out of the hotel room, got out of your bed, and showed up for the world,
Mm.
showed up for other people with compassion. So that's a really big one for me. It
Yeah.
really is.
I mean, compassion is important. Being, compassionate towards others and what their feelings are, and acknowledging and validating someone it helps lift someone up off their feet, man. And it's
Yeah.
so important because guess what? There's going to be a time in life where you need someone to be compassionate, where you need someone to acknowledge and validate your feelings so that you could feel seen, so that you could feel heard. So, man, treat others the way you want to be treated is so important. Um,
And treat others how they may need to be treated at that time.
yeah, absolutely, because you never know what somebody's going through. You never know what their life is like, and you being compassionate for them in that moment could shape their future. It could change so much for them. It could change the narrative in their life in that moment.
Yeah.
So being compassionate is so important. That's an awesome core value to live by, and that
Yeah.
shows strength in your character. That's awesome. And I would love for you to let the audience know what happened to that woman who had all the self doubt, the worry, the imposter syndrome, going into a male industry and shining her light as a woman and being successful. Tell us where you are now and what you're doing and where the audience can find you.
Mhm. So I basically took all of this lovely experience that I had traveling all over Europe and with the race car teams. And then after that, I had come back actually to Canada and I worked my way up the corporate ladder. I was a global engineering director and a VP of engineering. And I was very lucky to be able to also bring that compassion to the teams that I led or the teams that I had helped. And I was very, very fortunate, Joe, to be able to travel the world with my second career. And I take all of that experience and teach social and emotional intelligence, situational intelligence, cultural awareness in the keynotes that I deliver, whether that be at annual general meetings, AGMs, or professional association conferences. I've done some work with STEM groups. I love talking to kids now. That was never on my spectrum of work to do, but recently it's been a lot more. And I so appreciate you bringing up how important the message of what parents are saying to their kids
Mm.
is. And I think as I get older, I understand that, and I am putting a little bit more emphasis of speaking at at schools, because they can see that all of this can happen. And I also teach. I teach various relational skills, so that could be on civility in the workplace. It could be communication skills, and yeah. So the best place to find me, actually, Jessica Sudin, Soodwen, is on LinkedIn. Is my one of my favorite playgrounds. I'm just starting to get into the Instagram and yeah. So that's probably the best place right now.
Awesome. And man, emotional intelligence is so important. and it's important in your personal life, with your relationships. It's important in business. It's important in every aspect of your life. Um,
Yeah.
how
And
how important is emotional intelligence in the corporate world? I believe it's vital, and I think it's a piece that um, sometimes is missing. But I think it's really important. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
absolutely. So, some of the cornerstones of emotional intelligence are number one, having a strong emotional vocabulary. So there's over 300 emotions, named emotions in the English language, and we probably use 12. Angry, sad, frustrated, what have you. But there are very nuanced emotions. And the more that you dig into those, the more that you're able to more accurately express how you're feeling and identify how you're feeling. And then once you realize that you're feeling a certain way, it's your job to emotionally regulate yourself prior to interacting with others. So in the corporate setting, you want to, if there's a triggered situation, if we have tensions running high, if we're butting heads, between all the cross-functional groups or what have you, no, number one is that we have to regulate ourselves. And then we go and look at, okay, what am I observing with other people? Is there a way that I can help emotionally regulate someone else? Or is there a way that I can at least call it out and say, hey guys, why don't we take a break? Everyone take a sip of water, walk around, up and down the hallways, and then come back. Because these are some techniques that definitely get us out of that amygdala brain and get back into a collaborative environment. And all of this has to come from the top down.
Yeah, is
All
that
of this has to
all?
come from the top down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's got to, because if it doesn't come from the top, then the bottom's not going to get it. The bottom's not going to do it if they don't see the top doing it.
That's right. And when the top invests in these kind of activities, you're looking at less turnover. You're looking at more productivity. You're looking at the happiness of your employees, which any leader that should be paramount as well
Yeah.
for their goals.
Is that part where you mentioned about, because I believe in that pattern interrupt method, right? Like if
Yeah.
something, if emotions are running high, and you're like, you know what, let's just take a break, let's go get some water. That's kind of like a pattern interrupt, no?
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is.
and and and, and what are some other ways to have that pattern interrupt when those emotions are running high, whether it's in the corporate world, whether it's in your home life, whatever it is? What are some other pattern interrupt techniques that you could use for emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so there's sometimes when so there's mirror neurons, right? So if someone's getting angry at us, we're going to neuron image what we're seeing. So it's generally going to trigger us. So
Mm,
a couple of the times, let's say you're getting in a fight with someone, maybe decide to keep eye contact with them, but I'm going to focus on their eyebrow for a moment, or I'm going to focus on how they're blinking or the corner of their mouth, you know?
mm, yeah.
And these kind of things allow you to get out of the mirror neurons and not be meeting them where they're at in anger, but you're calming yourself down, you know? Same thing with getting into your body. Sorry, you're going to say something.
No, no, I'm thinking to myself how that's awesome. It makes sense because that also, I could see how it could change your mood, right? If somebody's all angry, 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 and then you start focusing on, somebody's eyebrows or another action that they make, it could lighten the mood for a minute, right? Because you're
Yeah.
starting to go from that angry point, and then maybe the person makes a movement with their eyebrow that makes you like giggle a little bit, and that just changes the whole mood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man,
And depending on what the situation is, you can call it out and you can change the whole situation around,
mm.
you know?
Can you give an example for that?
Sure. So there are times where, you know, I was in a lot of design reviews and maybe we should do it this way, we should do it that way, we should do it this way, we should do it that way. And then someone's in my face a little bit. And I say, hey, so the color of your eyes come from your mom or your dad?
Mm, yeah,
Something simple,
that's good. That's
something
good.
caring,
That's good. I'm gonna use that
you know?
next time I'm in an emotional rise with my kids or my
Yeah.
family members or somebody at the office. That's a good one. I like that.
Well,
Um,
and I think the important part is to follow through later. Like, I think writing about what works and what doesn't with certain types of people will also rise your own emotional intelligence in the way that you are paying attention to the behavioral changes of others based on how you're reacting. You know, I wrote a book. There's a book here, and I'm coming out with one more. They're collaboration books. And one of the things that I talk about is the power of realizing that you can put a pin on something for now, and that's okay, and come back to it later.
yes, that is so important, and it's vital uh, in relationships that you're in, whether it's your business relationship, your personal relationship with your significant other, your children, because putting a
Yeah.
pin on the situation so that you don't let emotions run wild. That's growth. That's maturity when you're able to do that. You're able to put a pin on a situation, walk away from it, and say, you know what? I'm going to come back to this when I'm more emotionally stable for this situation, where my emotions are not running high. And it takes the bigger person to do that in the situation. The person who's more mature, the person who's more emotionally regulated is the person that's going to do that. And for the audience that's listening out there and watching, pick up on that nugget that Jessica just dropped, man, because that's a jewel right there, and it's so important. Jessica, there's a few questions that I ask all my guests.
Okay.
So, what does the word purpose mean to you?
Mm, mm. Wow. Wow. The word purpose to me means, what is my gift to the world? What is my
Mm,
gift to the
yeah,
world?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's a blessing when you know that you have that gift with the world and you're willing to share it with the world, right? Because there's people out there who have all these gifts, they end up holding them inside because they don't know
Yeah.
how to let them out and share them with the world, man. And that's being selfish. Those gifts don't belong
Yes,
to you. They belong to the people out there that you're going to create impact with.
that's right. My gift is to make other people's day better. Then I have to get out there, make
Absolutely.
other people's day better.
Well, hey, girl, you made my day better today, man. This has been awesome for sure. So thank you for that. You
Nice.
definitely did. You shared your gift today.
Thank you. I can't not say this. So on May 10th, I've got another book launch coming out. It's called Good Grief, and it's with a dozen authors. And it's the very first time, Joe, that I ever wrote about being my mom's end of life caregiver.
that you became
And
what one
this,
more time? I didn't hear that.
my mom's end of life caregiver. So
Oh,
even though I'm an engineer, I was my mom's nurse for the last couple of months of her life so that I could give her the gift of dignity. She didn't want to have nurses around her because she was a nurse, and that she could pass and go to the other side at home. And this is another thing about purpose. I didn't realize that talking about grief and talking about those hard times,
mhm.
that's a gift as well.
Yeah, yeah. It sure
Because not a
is.
lot of people talk about these kind of things. And the more that they're shared, the better. Yeah.
100%. Vulnerability is a gift, without a doubt. And sharing your vulnerable moments with other people is giving the gift back, because there's people out there who might not know how to be vulnerable on their end when they go through a situation. And by you being
Right.
vulnerable, and sharing your difficult times and expressing things you went through helps other people be able to go through it as well. So
That's right. And it goes back to the very first part of our conversation of that loneliness. And I'm hoping that other people, other caregivers, even if you're not doing it as full on as I did it, not feeling so alone.
mm, yeah, yeah, that loneliness will bite you in the ass if you allow it to.
Yeah.
And it's so important to catch it when it's happening because there's so many people out there who struggle with it, who struggle with the loneliness and then isolation. And you hear isolation a lot. So you know, I'm in recovery from substance abuse, and you hear isolation a lot when it comes to substance abuse. But
Hmm.
isolation isn't just from people who are struggling with substance abuse. There's people who are not struggling with substance abuse and they isolate and their life becomes unmanageable and they create that toxic energy around them because of isolation. And
Yeah.
that's what loneliness can do to you if you allow it.
Yeah.
So when you hear the word reforge, what comes to mind?
Oh my God. My life. My life, growing up as a child of an alcoholic, and how do you reforge yourself from, and that was a lot in my junior high, early high school. So how did I reforge my life to get myself into being brave and going into engineering in university, you
Mm,
know, and then reforging myself from having these happy little cubicle jobs to going into working at racetracks, the best racetracks in Europe,
yeah.
and then reforging again by coming back to Canada, going up into corporate leadership and acting as a global leader or being a global leader, not acting, but being a global leader. And I think one of the biggest reforges for myself was to walk away from those really nice paying jobs that I have the credentials to get and deciding instead I need to take all this experience and share it via my speaking and via my workshops. And for me, that's just the next evolution of how my purpose comes with me.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, when it comes to leaving a paying job that you're getting your benefits from, you're doing, you know the check that you're getting, and then to go
Yeah.
to a world of entrepreneurship where you don't know where that next check's coming from. You got to go create that next check. That takes a lot of reforging there, and it takes a lot of tough skin and realizing that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You're walking in your purpose, and you're working for yourself now, and that can be challenging, and that can be lonely also. And learning to be able to grow through that, man, it's such a blessing though, man. I wouldn't trade being an
Yeah.
entrepreneur for anything in the world. I'll tell you that one. You know.
That's awesome. But I mean, I imagine you do the same things. You identify and you have to make it yourself as well. But you have to either identify a tribe or make yourself a tribe. Feel supported. It's not always it's not I can't say that it's a choice to be lonely because many times it is not a choice to be lonely, but at some point it has to be your choice to reforge that new path and find some allies, find some support, find some like-minded people. Think about your competitors as your best friends. You know,
Absolutely, and realize that you don't have to do it all by yourself. You don't have to reforge alone. You can go out there and say, hey, you know what? I need help. Raise your hand. Say, I need help with this.
yeah,
I don't want to do this on my own. I want to get help from people who have done it before me. I want to get help from people that can handle different situations better than I can so that I can focus on what I do best. I
yeah.
think it's so important. And
I imagine you experienced that on your recovery journey a lot.
oh yeah, I mean, if I would have, I tried to do it by myself so many times, and it just didn't work. You know what I mean? It wasn't
Yeah.
until I did raise my hand and say, "Hey, you know what? I'm not going to try to do this alone anymore. I'm gonna get help from other people who I know have done it." Same thing when I had to build up another business. You know, when I had to rebuild my business, I lost everything from seven figures to, you know, upside down on my ass, and I had to turn back around, rebuild another business, and it took me to surround myself with other multimillionaires who built their business from scratch and learn how they did it. And you know, it takes courage to raise your hand and say, I need help.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this alone.
And it's real hard to have that clarity to be able to say, I need help when you're in the throes of it all,
Yeah.
because that emotional dysregulation can get into that toxic place where you think, how am I ever going to get out of here? Like,
Yeah. And
mm,
also, you know, ego. Oh man, could that be a bastard? I mean, ego will eat you alive and not
yeah,
allow you to say, I need help, if you allow it to control you and you don't control your ego. Ego could be evil, man, if you allow it to be. Uh,
absolutely. And you asked me partway through here about whether it's corporate or anything else, why the emotional intelligence is important and how it shows up and what are some of the, cornerstones of it. And one of those things for me is identifying pride and identifying good pride, bad pride. And how I define those is this pride serving me or is it not serving me? Am
mm,
I coming from a place of ego or am I coming from a place of, yeah, I got this and this is aligned with my purpose, so this is good pride.
yeah, absolutely. That's good. Is this ego in this moment, is this pride serving me or not serving me? Is extremely important question to ask.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Jessica, there's somebody out there right now who wants to reforge their life and they don't have the tools, they don't have the know-how, they don't even know where to begin. What's one piece of advice that you could give that person that's looking to reforge their life?
Look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself that you love you.
Mm, love that. Love that.
You
That
know,
is so important. You gotta love yourself, man. Because if you don't love yourself, you can't have love for the people around you. You can't have love for the business that you're building. You can't have love for the life that you're looking to create. You gotta
and you
love.
can't and you can't ask for help.
No, you can't.
And a lot of the times when we're in those bad situations, we're so hard on ourselves. So it's more than just, I should say, it's more than just I love myself. I forgive myself. And
Mm,
it doesn't even matter whether you know or don't know the specific things that are hindering you from putting up your hand to get help. But a lot of it's going to come down from, oh my gosh, like I need to forgive myself for the self-sabotage. I need to forgive myself for, going back to drugs again. I need to forgive myself for falling off the wagon, whatever it is,
yeah.
for blowing up at my partner instead of keeping me calm. And whether you have to forgive yourself, you know, a few times, you have to do it enough that you believe it.
Absolutely. You know, there's something about forgiveness that is vital to your success. And you know, when it comes to forgiveness, I mean, it's if there's another person involved, guess what? The forgiving, it's not for them. It's for yourself anyway. And
That's
when
right.
you do have to forgive yourself, it's vital that you let go of that resentment that you have for yourself. I remember, you know, battling substance abuse and going through, you know, turmoil in my life. Something I had to learn to do was peel back the onion and take stock of who I was. I had to learn to forgive myself. I had to be able to look in the mirror and say, I'm sorry for the damage that I did to you. I'm sorry for the damage that I created for the family. And I had to
Yeah.
be able to learn
Mm.
to let go of that resentment that I had in order to make myself whole, in order to be able to love myself. So it's so important. Thank you for sharing that because it's vital for people to
It is vital.
understand that, you know, loving yourself
Yeah.
takes forgiveness a lot of times. Jessica, what's one thing that the audience doesn't know about you? that you enjoy doing for fun?
I like singing. I love karaoke. When I was in when I was in Basque Country, I was asked because I like to belt out songs here and there. I love singing in my car in the shower. And I actually sung in a Basque rock band. I sung backup for in Spanish and Basque. And then I translated one of their songs into English, one of the drummer's song, and I sang that and I did a few concerts out there. But there's something that no one knows about me, or not a lot of people know.
That is great. Well, Jessica, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you coming on to the show. I'm grateful that we had to make this connection and that we were able to create impact together.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
and for everyone out there listening and watching, please, man, I'm going to ask the same favor I always ask. Don't forget LFSS. Like, follow, subscribe, and most importantly, share the episode because there's somebody out there
Mm.
that's not watching the episode and not listening and they're looking to reforge their life, whether it's in their health, their finances, their business, their relationships. They're looking for that bounce back. And you sharing this episode or past episodes could help them reforge their life. So don't forget, share the episode, stay productive, stay profitable, and stay blessed, y'all.
You've been listening to Reforge Your Life with your host, Joe Rivera. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Joe Rivera and how he can help you or your organization reforge your life and regain your place at the top, head on over to withjoerivera.com and follow Joe on all social platforms. The Reforge Your Life podcast was produced by Thrive Loud Productions. Thanks for listening.